Welcome to another episode of Tiny Chair Talks. Today's topic, united, divided. Church politics. Politics, that is. Where do we go from here? The direction of the church. Let's get comfortable. So a lot of us, guilty of this myself, we don't know much about the church structure. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about, give us a brief outline of how the Adventist church structure is.
Okay. Ray, it begins with you and me. Mm-hmm. The church is not a church without people.
True.
And so it begins with people. Jesus didn't die for a church. He died for people and as individuals. So as they come together, they find strength in becoming a more cohesive unit. And so members form what is known as a church or a body.
Right.
Then churches, as they are organized, they may be organized in a conference within the Seventh-day Adventist Church. A conference is very territorial. For example, the Carolina Conference is made up of North and South Carolina, and the 169 churches and companies that we have right now. And that becomes a conference.
Right.
As the church expands its horizon and its influence, it's coordinated by a union conference. And so we function here, the Carolina Conference functions under the Southern Union Conferences. There are 9 union conferences in North America. The Union Conference here in the South is made up of the 8 states that are in the South. So we basically coordinate the work of God in all of those 8 states. But our reach is beyond those 8 states.
Absolutely.
And so to coordinate the wider spectrum, we form what are called divisions. 9 unions form up a division in North America, which includes all of Canada, Bermuda, and all of the United States of America. So there are 9 unions all across the territory of the North American division. But the North American division is not the entire world.
Right.
And so we have 13 world divisions that are spread out across the globe.
That has got to be the most elaborate, but specific and easy to understand explanation I've ever heard.
Well, thank you.
Now I see why you were nominated. So now, we hear this thing called delegates. What is a delegate?
A delegate is an individual that is chosen by the church to serve in a representative capacity. And they are chosen by virtue of constitutional guidelines that are made at a conference level or at a union conference level or at a division level.
So you can't nominate yourself as a delegate?
You can't. The church has to select you. The church selects its delegates and then shares them. And those delegates are chosen by virtue of the number of members that are in a church. So, for example, a church with a very small membership would not have the same representation as a church with a large membership.
That makes sense.
And so, they have to be a baptized member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So the local church basically makes those decisions. And it flows from the local church. Everything flows from the local church. Those delegates serve in the capacity of serving the wider spectrum of the decisions of the church.
So now, does a delegate represent the entire union? What area or capacity?
Depends. What happens is this: there are various decision-making levels.
Right.
For example, we don't have delegates in a local church. In a local church, they have like a nominating committee which elects the elders and the deacons and the various roles of leadership in the local church. But when it comes to a conference, for example, my position as the president, that position is an elected position. So a church from Charlotte, a church from Spartanburg, a church from Columbia, they will send delegates to a session that takes place once every 5 years. And then in that session, those delegates have the opportunity of voting those leaders or choosing a new leader. And the same thing happens at every level of responsibility and territory. For example, there are delegates for a union territory, which would be the entire southern part of the United States. The same thing is true for all of North America. And so those delegates are chosen by virtue of what has been established in a constitutional understanding. You can't, have everybody voting on everything.
True.
So you send representatives that have been commissioned with the sacred task of making important decisions for the church.
All right, so we talked about church decisions and how those decisions are made. What about the weight scale?
Well, if I'm understanding you correctly on the weight scale, the thing about the weight scale is this. Divisions that have larger memberships have more representatives. North America's membership is not as large as, say, the Inter-American Division. By the way, the Inter-American Division, that entire division, world division, has more members than the North American Division. It has more members than any other region of the world. In terms of the weight scale, they have a greater influence on decisions because they have a larger representation.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
How is it meant to be interpreted as far as the church manual?
For the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the scriptures are the foundation of everything that we believe or practice. But then beyond that, we have the church manual.
Right.
When you have an organizational structure of any kind, you have to have some guidelines. Otherwise it's every man for himself. It's chaos. And so you have to have some guidelines that give some directional purpose to how the church moves and how the church functions.
So is the manual left up to one's interpretation? Does it vary?
Well, no. There are some variances within the church manual. For example, the baptismal vows. You can choose to have the full 13-point baptismal vows repeated at a baptismal service, or you can choose a more abbreviated version of three, three condensed vows.
But within those three, it still encompasses all 13.
Exactly. Another thing is this, for example, the church manual gives authorization, and this actually happened in 1984, where the representation of the General Conference, which is called an annual council, voted to allow women to serve in the position of elders in the church. Some churches feel uncomfortable with that. The manual also states that it is the local church that makes those decisions, not the conference, not the union conference, not the division. It is the local church that makes those decisions. And so some churches will not have women serving as elders or in a leadership capacity in a church.
But according to the manual, that's their right.
That's their right, correct. But so there's some variances there. But everything is spelled out pretty clearly as to what those variances are and where there's not a variance. I want to share with you, this is, by the way, this is a copy of what the church manual looks like today. This is the latest version. It was revised in 2015 at the last General Conference.
Is this available or?
It's available online, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, you can just download this as a PDF online.
Wow.
Google or whatever, and just say Seventh-day Adventist Church Manual. You can get the entire church manual.
And here are the baptismal vows that you were just talking about, the 13. Amazing.
Right, exactly.
So let's address the relationship between policy and doctrines and beliefs and biblical instruction. So in light of the recent issues with compliance and women ordination, there's been a lot of conflicting claims of concepts surrounding the whole women ordination.
Right.
Where do we go with that as a church? Share, please.